Good morning, everybody. Cynthia Allen, Feldenkrais Awareness Summit. We're here on day 6. I hope you enjoyed your lesson this morning with Air Feely. She taught a lesson that she calls Towards Optimal Crunches. And if you didn't have a chance to do it, I think it's very important to do, and you can catch it in the 48-hour replay. We'll be starting this new track of this. We'll be continuing this track. I'm sorry, not starting. We'll be continuing this track on the deeper teachings of Dr. Feldenkrais's. First, just do take a little gander around the platform, or maybe I should just say look. That's a colloquialism that probably doesn't work well for people who don't have English as their first language. So look around the platform and find the chat area so that you can introduce yourself and begin talking with each other. Just a reminder, while we are not responding to the chat at this time, we will fold the chat into the panel discussion later, so your conversation gives us ideas to spark and jump off from. Also, Arlene Klein, our summit coordinator, is over there already introducing herself, and she'd also be happy to try to help you if you're having any kind of problems, either through the Q&A or through the chat. So I'm very pleased here today to introduce you to Donna Blank. Donna Blank has been a senior trainer in the Feldenkrais method for quite a while now. She is not only a Feldenkrais practitioner, but a whole body focusing trainer and a Laban movement analyst. She's been extremely, I guess, fortunate to have lived in the time frame where she could actually study with the originators of all these works. She's taught in schools, universities, and trainings throughout the U.S. And one of the things that I always think of her about in relationship to her is that she was the principal curriculum designer for on the faculty of the master's degree program for movement at Wesleyan University, which is really very significant in the time frame that was happening, and really still not happening as much as it needs to. So we're very pleased for that. She's continued on to serve the Feldenkrais community on the Feldenkrais Guild of North America, BOD, and the Training Advisory Board on the International Feldenkrais Federation at the BOD, and she is currently a major force in the Legacy Group, which is fostering dialogue on the future of the Feldenkrais method. And she loves to continue to study in meditation and Qigong. So thank you so much, Donna, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Good, good. So it's I guess you're trying to move out of winter over there in New England, although you guys, I think, unlike us, might have another few weeks of it.
Well, I'm looking at dogwoods blossoming right now.
Oh, beautiful. Good.
We go up to 80 and down to 35, but I would say we're over the hump.
Great.
We're into spring here. There's a lot of green, and it's very welcome.
Well, yeah, it is, isn't it? I mean, the last 2 or 3 days, I've just been feeling like I'm in a bit of heaven, just out walking about, listening, smelling. It's such a beautiful reflection of, I think, our topic, actually, which is this dance between nervous systems, this embodiment, what is it that can happen in between a practitioner and a client. And nature, there's something happening between us and nature, and maybe it's the same thing. I don't know.
Maybe it is. It's certainly connected. Yeah?
Yeah.
I agree. Because when we're connected with our environment that's alive, we're connected with aliveness, the aliveness in ourselves that's enhanced. We're part of each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think so that it gets renewed by renewing that connection, is my experience.
Yeah. So this can be a kind of disembodied medium, right? That even though we're looking at each other, we might not, and other people are watching, it can have a little feeling of distance or not being with each other. But I know your desire, and I'll do my best to drop into that space with you, is for us to just have a really good connection between us, and to feel our way through the way we would feel our way through maybe in a functional integration lesson.
Perfect.
And why don't you start us out trying to help us understand even what functional integration is? It's something we didn't really talk about in last year's summit, and we really don't talk about it much here either. So maybe we can start to break that open.
So functional integrations form, insofar as there's a form, that is that usually the client is lying down or sitting. It could be walking, it could be in any situation, but very often lying down on a table. And the practitioner is working hands-on. And it's primarily a nonverbal conversation through sensation between the two people. What does that mean, right? So how to describe that? I just want to say to begin that Moshe Feldenkrais was an eclectic thinker, and he was a synthesizer of so many disciplines, from physics to biology to anatomy to psychology. So we can describe our work in so many different languages. I don't mean French, English, German. I mean the language of many different disciplines when we're trying to get at what is this that we do. And that can be confusing. And I would say that the other issue is that Moshe encouraged us very clearly to each develop our own handwriting. So not only are there multidisciplinary styles and language, but there are personal styles. So I can speak from my own understanding and my own style. And I'm sure in the summit, this is one of the experiences for anyone participating, is that each person can sound a little different. Well, what is that? What is that? Because we do describe it in different languages, and our own backgrounds, our own histories support what that is. There is a set of principles for sure, but the way that can be described is so complex and full of possibility. So I just want to underscore that I'm describing this from my own perspective, and a neuroscientist or a biologist might have different language for what they're focusing on and what they actually see in a lesson, because a lesson is also a very, it's a living organism. It's a living process. And because it's a living process, everyone who looks at it is going to see the life in it from his or her own perspective. So how do we enter into that process is what I'm very interested in. And how do we train ourselves? How do we learn to be present in that dialogue, in that nonverbal sensory conversation? So that's where I would begin it. I would say that what is functional integration? It's another way of thinking about the specifics of it. Is, why does somebody come? What do they want? How do I, as a practitioner, respond to that? So people come for all kinds of reasons. They come because they're in pain, because they're anxious or stressed, because they want to improve something that they do, perhaps as a profession. Maybe they play the violin or an athlete, or I was a dancer, so I was very interested in that aspect. And the language that I thought in for a long time came from the movement of dance. So, but that's very different than somebody who has a traumatic brain injury and is coming for that reason. So the person comes with issues, that usually because they want to improve that. And our job is very clearly not to fix that. That's, I think, one of the fundamental principles of Feldenkrais is we don't try to fix something that's broken. And we don't try to lay a lesson or lay a structure on somebody as if we have a system that if somebody simply participates in that system and structure, that they will improve. Now, the structures we have are really intelligent, but that's not the life of it, I think. The life of it is in the active participation, curiosity, exploration that both the practitioner and the client are dancing in together. That's how I experience it. So what happens in a Feldenkrais lesson optimally is that, and Moshe would describe it that way, I think in The Elusive Obvious, his last book, he talked about helping someone restore themselves to their basic wellness, to their basic sense of well-being that is intrinsic in us. It's not something we have to acquire. So how would that manifest? It would manifest in relaxation and the capacity to be more supported by the ground. It would manifest in the belly relaxing, in circulation increasing, in a sense of inner aliveness, as well as skeletal connection, which when the person stands up or sits up will become even clearer. So that's the main goal of a functional integration lesson. And it can, once one has recovered that state, and let me just say, why aren't we in that state all the time? Because of our histories, because of our culture, because of life, right? We have all the challenges of life that each of us has met as valiantly as possible. And in doing that, we develop all kinds of habits and patterns to protect ourselves, really, on one level or another. And they're part of our unconscious feeling and image of ourselves. So because they're unconscious, it's a little tricky. So in a functional integration lesson, optimally, the person on the table begins to they may begin to recognize some of those habits. They may really notice. I'm just thinking of several clients of mine this week who went, oh, I'm noticing that when we're moving my head this way, I'm suddenly wanting to move it the other way and my eyes are looking there. I'm flooding myself. Now that's an amazing amount of awareness of what's happening with his attention. That until things are slowed down and settled down enough from the lesson, somebody doesn't notice. It's something that's an automatic habit of coping up until that time. Or, oh, I didn't notice that I'm really holding this whole part of my shoulder girdle in a way, right? That is just part of how I feel myself, or Moshe would call that our self-image. It's just part of the way we experience ourselves unconsciously. So in a functional integration lesson, some of those patterns may actually become heightened and somebody may become more aware of them, and then they begin to shift. Sometimes they just shift without their noticing. So there's a whole continuum of how we can work with someone. I would say that's a whole long topic of conversation, but for some people, if you support them as a practitioner in bringing their awareness to a habit like that, their response will be quite negative. They'll feel self-conscious, or they'll be quick to judge or correct themselves, and oh, I shouldn't be doing it that way, and some feeling of not okayness. For some people, they're really curious. And it's like, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. Oh my goodness, that feels so much better. So there's a continuum, and part of the dance between two nervous systems is for the practitioner to sense what is, how to meet someone where they're available, where they're feeling safe enough to stay open with their attention, safe enough to be open so they can be curious and respond in a new way. if they're not in that open, safe state, they naturally have to use their defenses again in those habits. And that'll happen before you know it. And that happens in a lesson if I move too quickly sometimes, or something, I have an idea that's coming from up here instead of from more deeply felt, or I'm experimenting with something, I can feel, oh, they just went back to that pattern again. That can be an opportunity also. Is it to, oh, because then you can draw their attention to that and they may notice that, and then we can shift it again. So there's a whole dance going on many, many levels of how to be with someone in a way that they can begin to let their system settle and quiet, where all of these functions that are evolutionarily supported in us, that we were born with, begin to manifest on a fuller and fuller level. And the more that emerges, the more available we are to learn new information as well.
Well, Donna, that's, I feel like you're just giving me a really practical insight into this quote that we throw around a lot about the dance between two nervous systems. And frankly, I'm surprised because I tend to think of you as more ethereal in your approach. So let me just say, I was expecting a whole conversation about the field and what you gave, and I know you can go there. But what you gave me was actually something that I hadn't, for some reason, I don't think I had ever quite pulled the words. I mean, even though I talk about that curiosity, that conversation of curiosity and awareness and sensation, I don't think I'd ever quite pulled that language into my concept of the dance specifically, that it was that practical. That it could be that practical.
It's absolutely practical. It's, I mean, if it's only ethereal, if it's only these big ideas, it's not really alive, right? And if it's only practical, it can be devoid of all of the richness of all of the dimensions that can come to this work. So, you know, I think whenever I'm thinking about describing Feldenkrais work, or anything meaningful, actually, there's always a both. There's always a paradox. There's always, well, there's this and there's that, right? Because we can never grasp the whole thing with language. And that's, I think that was Moshe's frustration as well as his gift in what he offered, because he could describe the same lesson 5 different ways at 5 different times, yeah? And we go, well, what does that mean, right? Because we want to get it, right? And really, it's getting, to me, the dance between two nervous systems, and also why I feel whole body focusing has supported this perspective in me, is learning to be in my own nervous system with everything that comes up, my anxieties, my reactions, all of it, how to be with that in a way where I can still stay basically whole, quiet, and centered while that dance is happening inside me of what comes up.
Right.
The more I can do that, the more I'm available to be with the person on the table in a way where I can be present to her or to him with that dance going on in her or him. Mm-hmm. And be curious about it. Like all kinds of stuff can bubble up and go back down, or maybe come to have more attention that we can give it. And that's the dance. It's like, it's improvisational dance. It's not like the foxtrot where, you know, you learn with those squares and you put your foot here and you put your foot here and you put your foot here and then you put the music to it and you're doing the box step or something. It's really, there may be patterns of awareness in my skillful background. There are, of possibilities. But once I'm with a person, I am meeting them there at that point where it's nervous system to nervous system.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
then I'll add one more thing to that. It's also, we describe it a lot in our work and in the trainings, as skeleton to skeleton connection. So it's both. It's both. That skeletal connection, that I can organize myself in a way that the movement is moving through me as directly as possible, and that I make a connection, or find a connection is a better word, with the person on the table to her skeleton. And together we become one ensemble. And by the way, as I understand it, the Hebrew word for bones is self.
Mhm.
So it's this skeletal connection and dance and relationship is a primary way that we work. I think the nervous system and how attuned we are in our own nervous system is an additional, adds additional depth and information to what we're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And the clarity with which we are curious or exploring or asking questions without expecting a specific answer would also allow a different kind of response than when you're looking for a specific answer, trying to get a specific answer, pushing for a specific answer.
Amen. Amen. It's a completely different world.
And that, I think, is, one of the things that if people have been experiencing lessons in terms of the awareness through movement lessons, often called ATMs by us, then they've experienced this sort of incessant questioning, this incessant sort of exploration that for some people makes no sense, and for other people, once they've hung out with it a while, makes all kinds of sense. And that's the same kind of quality that we're looking for through our touch in functional integration, is it not?
I agree. I agree. And what you just said leads me to something that I think of a lot, which is in our work, because movement is our medium, sensation, sensing and moving, and bringing our attention to what we're doing and how we're doing it. Since that's our medium, many people come to this work with a sort of lenses like this on the movement, right? I want to improve my movement. And then there's can be this sort of follow through thinking of, well, and if I improve my movement, then my whole being will improve on every level, right? I find that limiting, right? The movement is essential, but there's inner movement. And the inner movement, the more we become alive to it, this can become very subtle. There's a continuum of awareness. First of all, there's a continuum of awareness, and then there's a continuum of awareness of sensitivity to inner movement as it manifests outwardly in space and in action with intention. And we can address any of those levels or layers and then begin to integrate them, meeting the person where they are. So some people have a real doing orientation towards the work, right? And when they do, it's like, oh, these questions are, there's too many questions. Let me just get to it, right? That kind of, and a lot of people are on the doer side, right? And our culture really supports that. And on the other side, there's being. And a little later, we'll do something that really goes into a sensory experience of that, of beingness, where there's nothing to do, where the sense of being here, embodied, experiencing myself in a sensory way, but then with all that comes from that, is the being aspect. And whole body focusing really supports listening at that level, which is why I find it very supportive of doing functional integration. it's almost like the prequel to any kind of doing. And so I think it was Art Blakey who said that phrase, doobie doobie doo, right? And I think that's how it is. It's doobie doobie doo, right? So if we get too far on the doing side, we lose this richness and foundational aspect of aliveness that has its own wisdom, knowledge, and manifestation. So we can miss that if we're too focused on the doing. On the other hand, there are people who can hang out in the being side and they might not do much. So again, it's this both. It's this dance. It's another dance.
That's very valuable, very valuable. Can we maybe give people a look at what a functional integration lesson could look like?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just pull up your video here.
Let me just say, this is a very quiet lesson. Dennis Leary once said, sometimes watching functional integration lessons is like watching paint dry. I don't know how much you can see in the video, but at least it'll give you a sense of the situation. And maybe
Yeah, we've never shown one on the summit, so I think it's important to show something, and it gives people just a tiny little context, and then you could talk about it a little bit more. Okay.
Okay.
That's very quiet.
It's very quiet, and also just to say that video was jumpy.
Jumpy,
So
yeah.
Sudden little jumps from one place to another was not the quality of the movement. It was all very smooth and
Yeah, that's because it was shot on my cell phone.
yeah, right.
I not only had to stand, but it's also a little bit of a low resolution. But yeah, so this was at the conference last year, and so just give us some context about what people may be wondering what they saw.
So the person had asked for, I believe, a sense of ease and a sense of uprightness. She asked for more than that, but that's what's coming to me right now about it. And this was toward the little snippet that we just saw was toward the end of the lesson. I had worked through her feet and legs and up through her whole skeletal connection, looking for that connection so that if at the point where she could stand, that she could experience herself as easier, lighter, more supported, and her anti-gravity reflexes would be working. So she would have this sense of lightness while still feeling very supported by the ground. And at that particular moment in the lesson, which was toward the end, I had noticed that there was something not moving through up in here. And I was curious about what that was. I could feel it from her feet because as a practitioner, we're trained to sense the whole system from any place that we enter the system. So we had found our way through from her feet up to about here. And there was something up here that wasn't happening. So I came to her head, and I felt something about her neck, and I immediately sensed that there was something also about the jaw, which is very connected functionally to how we organize through our head, neck, and eyes, and everything else. But it's a primary joint, and it's the earliest joint in development of communication, nurturing. So it's a very fundamental uh, part of our feeling about ourselves. So I actually had my hand on the mandible, I think another one on her forehead, and I was moving her jaw, exploring where it would move in a differentiated way from her cranium so that she could begin to notice something about what the possibilities were there. Bringing her attention there gently, not pushing her into anything that her system wasn't ready for, but exploring that easy space where something was possible. And sure enough, when I went back then to feel through her neck and head, all of this had reorganized. And then you saw at one moment, I had my hand under her neck and I could simply pull. And if you notice, it was a brief moment, but you caught it on the camera. As I pulled, it went right through her skeleton so that her feet were even moving from that and that was with almost zero effort on my part, that kind of connectedness was available.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like you were laying your hands on and doing nothing, really. You know, it kind of had that quality of it. And then I love how you're saying, you know, you gave her some sense of something here, you know, that she could go, oh, huh, what, just and then you don't do the reorganizing, right?
Exactly.
She does the reorganizing, and that happens mostly unconsciously.
Yes, yes. And I would just add one more thing. You see in that video, I sit back a lot.
You do.
That's part of the dance. And that's not, sitting back that much is not always the way it's done. But I was really listening to how her system was responding and also waiting, knowing that she would, right? But that I wouldn't know exactly how that would happen. I knew that by bringing her attention here, something would wake up. Then her system, as you're saying, did the reorganizing.
Well, and I remember the entirety of that functional integration lesson. So functional integration lessons might run 30 to 45 to an hour. And that lesson was close to an hour long. And I remember you sitting back a lot through the entire lesson. There was like a kind of sense of coming forward and exploring, and then a kind of coming back. And I was as interested in watching her breath as I was as interested in watching yours.
Yes. And we were connected. When I sat back, I was still very present and connected with her. So there's an example of the nervous system to nervous system in touching, but also in my sensing, feeling her response when my hands were not touching her.
Mm-hmm.
So it can have lots of forms.
Mm-hmm.
It can have lots of forms. That's the complexity of learning this work.
Yeah. So give us a little sense then, a little more of a sense about whole body focusing and how you've incorporated that.
Yes. So whole body focusing, the whole field of focusing, let me just back up a little bit, was started by Eugene Gendlin, and who was a phenomenologist and a psychologist who realized that all this thinking we're doing, and he was brilliant, taught at the University of Chicago, was missing, could be missing what he called the felt sense, or the inner embodied experience. And so he began to develop this work of deep listening. So you might have an issue, right? I have a question about something. It's coming from my thinking on some level. And then go inside with your attention and begin to sense and feel what's coming from a body sense when I ask that question. And often what's coming is very fuzzy, unclear. It's a nonverbal process. And then something starts to emerge from that can be maybe a little clearer. And at that point in traditional focusing, then you notice whether the question I'm asking matches that inner sensation or not, which is a really interesting process, right? Because we can be thinking something, we can be thinking we understand something about what we're feeling, and our body could be saying something really quite different that we haven't tuned into. So this process of being with both the question and the listening from what's coming from a felt sense and getting it closer and closer is part of the way I would describe traditional focusing. And it's being done in many, many different forms. Talk about different handwritings. In that field, it's encouraged tremendously, as well as what Jenlin called crossings, which is combining focusing with any other discipline, which could be anything from functional integration, which we're talking about today, to working in a war-torn country with survivors. And, whatever processes they're doing, bringing the focusing aspect into those social networks and how that's working. Or it can be applied in a myriad of ways. And Jenlin actually understood that this was such a fundamental kind of process that it really could cross with other things without interfering with the integrity of the other discipline. So the work that I've studied most is whole body focusing, which was started by Kevin McKevenue. And Kevin had worked with Jean Jenlin from almost the beginning and had been a trainer in traditional focusing for decades. But he's also an Alexander teacher and found that for himself, the Alexander work was limited and that he never really could find this real inner sense of ease and well-being, even though the words and the directions all seemed right. He couldn't find it for himself. So he began to discover this process within himself, which uses focusing, but in I would say a more embodied way than traditional focusing. You can stay very nonverbal in whole body focusing for a very long time without ever having to have words come. And maybe they will. It doesn't matter. That's a very open question in the work. So I just want to say that whole body focusing is a very embodied, listening to the life of what's happening from within the body kind of process. And again, you can bring an issue or a question to it, like what's with my knee or what's with my marriage, right? It could be anything. And you go through a process, which I'd like us to do, of what he calls an attunement, which is a very simple process of deep listening through the body to our connection with the environment. Lots of things wake up from giving that room and space. He calls that grounded presence. We could call it a lot of things. We don't have to be attached to the name. But what that direct experience is foundational for whatever follows. In whole body focusing, there are a whole sequence of steps that can follow. I'm not as interested in that per se in this connection with functional integration as in our finding that deep embodied presence, grounding experience where we can be present to everything coming up in us. Sometimes it can be I have no idea what to do with this person and I want to run away. Or this person is annoying. Or, I mean, we can have a thousand, this person reminds me of my mother, whatever it is, right? That all of those levels and dimensions are going on in us when we're giving a lesson. The question is whether we're aware of them or not. When we're aware of them and can stay present and not be unconsciously reactive to them, we're far more present for the other person. And we're also not projecting things on the other person as much. So that's the aspect of whole body focusing that I would like us to have a little experience with. And I can say that with my clients, when we've spent some time doing this attunement and grounded presence, when we come back to a functional integration lesson, or when they're doing awareness through movement, over time, the depth of their presence with themselves and to what's going on with them seems quite profound. I was just realizing in the last couple of weeks, the things that people have been saying at the end of lessons are amazing, and they're very integrative in that sense. One woman who's suffered a lot of falls from horses in other ways, and recently had another one. She was talking about having difficulty going downstairs. And when we began to unpack that in the initial conversation we had, it turned out she's literally gripping the staircase in order to go down. But she wasn't really aware that that was a problem. She thought she was really improving, which she was. But the degree of stress, the degree of issues there that were interfering with her being able to descend easily, she wasn't, that was what we could begin to unpack and open up. And I worked with her breathing and her awareness of her breathing at a really profound level, and beginning to move, just rolling her leg out, or it could have been any movement, while listening to that level of autonomic breathing that was easy, that she wasn't used to. When her system was settled, she reported that she was able to come down the stairs. And the next time she came back and said, you know what, I was coming down the stairs carrying a cup of coffee, and that was just fine. And then as she got up to walk after this last session, she said, my walking may not be correct right now. It's not. But every step feels like a true step. And so we had gotten to something very essential about her really being with her ease and her quietness and her nervous system, that then can be the foundation for more learning about the function that can be more and more differentiated and refined.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And to talk about that, I just want to say. So as I said, I just want to lead you all in an attunement about the first part of whole body focusing. I want to be clear that whole body focusing has many steps that can unfold that we're not doing today. So that, because for whole body focusers who may be listening, they'll recognize that this is the first step of grounded presence. And it does also connect with being in a state of openness and not knowing. We call it not knowing, which is very familiar to Feldenkrais practitioners when they're really in the dance. There are moments when we have no idea what's going to emerge next, and we're open to that. And life comes from that capacity to tolerate not knowing what the next thing to do is, while we have our background of skills and ideas and questions behind us, but not in the doing mode. We can stay longer in not knowing. So that's something that connects in both these processes too. So that'll come in to this as well. Good. So let's close our eyes, and I will be doing this as well in myself because we're all in the dance together. And as we close your eyes, if that's comfortable to do, always do what's comfortable and don't push yourself into something that does not feel right. Consent is essential. And as your eyes are closed or open, if that's the way you would like, slowly just begin to let your attention go to your feet. Without any particular noticing, sometimes in ATM we may be noticing a lot of detail about that. But let's just do this in a general way. So just noticing, where do I feel connection, contact with the ground? Just take a moment to tune in to that sensation of feet, ground. Where do I feel particular connection? And again, the mind might say, oh, where don't I? And all that. Never mind about that so much. Really, where I do feel connection. It's just saying hello to that. Making some room for that recognition, that experience. Of course, there's two parts in that relationship. The ground is also meeting us. So just notice that my feet are connecting with the ground and the ground is meeting me. And there's a dance there as well because it's alive. The earth is alive. We're alive. And as we begin to feel that connection, we may begin to feel other sensations that begin to wake up. When we bring our awareness to the aliveness, something happens. You can begin to notice also if you're sitting, whatever situation you're in, what other connections do you feel? If you're sitting in the chair, you may feel your sits bones, your buttocks, sitting in the chair. And again, just notice the sensation of contact, just how it is, just how it is. And the chair meeting you back. And I can feel in myself, I just took a deep breath, that something about saying hello to that, let me feel more support. And my system began to respond in its own way. And begin to notice also then as you are connecting with your feet, with your buttocks, through those connections with the ground, the sensations coming up through you, through your ankles, your calves, lower legs and knees, thighs, into your hip joints, into your pelvic bowl and belly, and upward through your spine, just as it is. Your chest, rib case, shoulder girdle, arms, hands. Just saying hello to that whole sense of you, whatever's happening inside. Up through your throat and neck, into your head, your jaw, your face, eyes, cheeks, lips. Just saying hello to those inner sensations of the whole of you there. And noticing as you bring your attention there, do you feel responses in yourself? Just making room, saying hello for whatever's happening or not happening. Whatever's happening or not happening is fine. You might notice also the air around you. Whenever we begin to connect with what's inside, to what's outside, to the ground, to the air, to the sounds, we are in connection with the whole of us. We're wired to be in connection with the whole environment. And as we begin to bring more attention to that, we can wake up a little more. So just sensing the air on your skin, coming in and out through your nostrils or your mouth, as the case might be. Just witnessing that. You're the observer of this. Nothing to do. Just noticing what's there. And sensing the space around you. Sensing below, how far below. Sensing above you. Noticing the boundary of your skull, and then what's above. How far above do you notice? A few inches, a few feet, to the ceiling, beyond the ceiling. Just saying hello to how that is for you. And noticing what's in front of you. Just sensing what's in front and how far does that extend for you? Does it extend to the walls, to the horizon? Behind you, sensing behind you that more elusive space for many of us. Just saying hello. There's the whole back of your spine and ribs and pelvis and head, backs of your legs and heels, and then back behind, beyond. Again, how far does your attention extend in a way that you can still be with your felt sense of this? Not so much the idea as felt sense. And to the left side of you. Again, sensing the side of your body and beyond that, outward. How far? And to the right side. Again, noticing for yourself. Also noticing the responses you may be feeling as you extend your attention in these different directions. when we bring our awareness like this, something happens. There's a response. It's not an inert, finite object. We're alive. And when we bring our attention, something wakes up. Just notice, what is that for you? It could be little tinglings, it could be shifts inside, it could be breathing changes. My body is starting to move actually in space as well. That can happen. You can just, if it's possible for you, if it's okay for you, to just give permission for your body to respond in whatever way is happening. You're just making space for noticing what's happening. And just give yourself a minute or so to enjoy that, whatever experience you're having. Just coming into being more present with yourself, feeling from inside to outside, from bottom to top, upward. Whatever's coming. You may notice also thoughts, feelings coming. That's natural. And for now, you can just return your attention to this sense of connection to the ground, to the space around you, or to sounds, or to the air. Whatever's alive for you. You may notice that one of those aspects is more alive for you. That's what matters. Where do you feel connection? Just give that another minute. And that simple sense of me here. And then let your body know that you can bring this to a close. Again, it doesn't have to be a doing, just acknowledging that. There'll be a response. And when you're ready, open your eyes. You can come back together. Not that we weren't, but we can bring our attention a little more to that.
It's just a strong desire to keep that softer focus, right? That online programming doesn't lend itself to.
Yes, and yet I can hear it in your voice. I can feel that.
Yeah.
So that part of the prosody of our voice, the sound, the quality of our voice does communicate, even online, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a very lovely experience for me, for feeling both the support of the ground, the connection to the space around, and then that I can imagine how that builds both a spaciousness and support for emotions as it arises.
Exactly. Exactly that. So I think of it as the kind of precondition for FI, also for awareness through movement. That when you're in that softer spaciousness and ease and sense of support more fully, your system is more open to whatever you're curious about exploring.
Mhm.
It's just as that client was saying, it's a true step, or it's a true movement. It's truer to, I know it more in myself. And I can feel when that's off, when I'm over efforting, and I can come back. I can come back to this sense of being present to what's me, here, really me, which is embodied. And we have all of these cues and information that comes from inside when we do that.
Mhm.
Was there any more that came for you from your experience?
The beginning for me felt a lot like the beginning of an awareness through movement scan. Having said that, even though it has had that feel, I don't normally experience myself in an X-ray like fashion. But the beginning of this, for some reason, I really experienced, as you were guiding, as if I were seeing the skeleton of my feet and my legs, which that is not typical for me. It was interesting, and that really occurred all the way up until around the pelvis, and then that shifted at that point. I would say to maybe a deeper spaciousness and less structure.
Mm-hmm. So somehow both were there,
Mm-hmm.
which is wonderful, right? We have all of these perceptions, right? And we can, so if I got what you said, simply by being in this, tuning in this way, your skeleton appeared more clearly than is usual for you.
Mm-hmm.
And
In a much more visual, sort of almost a much more visual as well as felt sense.
Yeah.
You feel it, quite clearly, but I don't think I typically have a visual sense of my skeleton. And it was very visual. Yeah.
Yeah. And so both the felt and the visual were there, which is in focusing language, you say more of you was there, right? More possibilities came that really came right from inside out. They're not something that you have to acquire in any way. It's the aliveness brings that forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even towards the end, even though I'm sitting in a chair that has a back to it, so I've got an awful lot of support. There was this, desire to sort of like move sort of in this sort of like a spirally, circular kind of fashion.
Yeah. So if you continue in whole body focusing, that can be a whole large component of the work. And Kevin calls it inner directed spontaneous movement. And that can be looked at a lot of different levels. In craniosacral, they talk about unwinding. And sometimes the body does just begin, as it begins to feel more support, it begins to unwind a lot of stress patterns, right? And the musculature begins to reorganize and the breathing begins to reorganize. It can also be more than that. Sometimes the body goes into unusual movements. And I think that's not so much a part of what we're doing when we're connecting this with Feldenkrais, because we have our own process here. But it is possible to go into these spontaneous movements, which were just beginning to happen for you a little. And it's letting that flow start to move. And sometimes there's history in there. There's all kinds of patterns in that begin to come forward, to show themselves, that we can give attention to by being present. So the whole body focusing process can unfold in that way while we still stay in grounded presence with whatever's coming up for our attention.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to start wrapping us up here. We're going to continue at noon, 12 noon Eastern Daylight Time with Elizabeth Behringer. She's going to be taking us into our third talk of this track on how we can pull out some of the roots of the Feldenkrais method from the martial arts roots. So I'm looking forward to that and hope that you will tune back in with us at that time. And Donna, thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation with me, and very much appreciate you.
Thank you, and thank you for the conversation, because that's the dance too. That's when it all happens.
Yeah.
So
thanks.
thank you very much for your leading the conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you for being willing to join and step out of your own comfort zone with this
Okay.
format. So, okay, goodbye everybody. We'll see you in a little bit.